My wife lied to me for 7 years until a doctor revealed the truth in one sentence. I used to believe nothing in the world was more sacred than hearing your child call you dad. Until the night a doctor looked me in the eye and said, "You can't donate blood to your son because you're not a biological match." My name is Daniel. I'm 38, a structural engineer, a quiet husband, a devoted father. For 7 years, I was always there, the one who held him during his vaccinations, who drove him to school every morning, who memorized every allergy, every medication, every fever. I knew we weren't perfect, but I believed we were real. I believed that when Leo called me dad, it meant something true. Until that night. Leo collapsed on the living room floor, fever spiking, body seizing. We rushed him to the hospital. He needed an urgent blood transfusion. I stepped forward, "Take mine. I'm his father." Minutes later, the doctor returned, eyes careful, voice calm. "We're sorry, you can't donate. Your blood types don't match. You can't be his biological father." I didn't scream, I didn't shatter anything. But something inside me crumbled, and that was the start of a journey I never saw coming. The search for truth in a family I thought was mine. Then Daniel was the quiet kind of man, the type who lived by structure, routine, and quiet acts of care. He wasn't the one to pour out affection with words, but he was there, every time his wife needed something, every single time his son was sick. Nora, his wife, was a freelance interior designer. She once described herself as a wild one in her younger years, full of mistake scars and bad choices. Daniel never pried. He accepted her past and all. They got married after a year of long distance. 6 months later, Leo was born. Daniel never questioned anything. The boy resembled him at least a little, and honestly, all it took was the word dad from Leo's mouth and the rest of the world faded away. But in recent years, Leo got sick more often, strange allergic reactions, recurring high fevers. ER visits became routine. Daniel was the one tracking it, all the one who logged appointments, organized the medication lists, remembered every injection. Nora, by contrast, was always busy. Projects, clients. She loved Leo, but Daniel carried the details. Things shifted the day a pediatrician recommended expanded genetic testing. Daniel noted his blood type O. The doctor paused when she looked at Leo's file. Leo was AB. Daniel brushed it off at first, a mistake maybe, a mix-up. But something didn't sit right. He began rechecking Leo's vaccination records, noticed signatures that weren't his, dates that didn't match the days he remembered taking Leo to the clinic. No one had lied to him, not out loud. But it was the precision of the silence, the seamlessness of it all, that chilled him to the bone. And that was the moment Daniel made a decision. He wouldn't cry. He wouldn't confront. He would investigate. Quietly, thoroughly, and without mercy, not out of rage, but out of respect for the truth. Daniel wasn't the suspicious type, but ever since that night in the hospital when the doctor looked him in the eye and said, "You're not biologically related," every strange moment he'd ever brushed aside came flooding back with clarity. He remembered. Why was it always Nora who handled Leo's vaccinations, checkups, and insurance paperwork? There was that one time Daniel offered to take Leo in for a booster shot. Nora had smiled and said, "Let me handle it, you're busy. It's just a nurse visit, nothing major." Back then it felt like care. Now it chilled him. He opened the family document drawer, once a chaotic pile of papers, and began sorting everything. Medical records, immunization cards, birth certificates. Then he found something. An early ultrasound, grainy black and white. The name Nora A. White was clear, but there was no father's name listed. He remembered what she'd said at the time. It was a walk-in. "I went alone." The hospital rushed the forms. He believed her. He hadn't asked questions. Now he no longer trusted simple answers. For the first time in his own home, Daniel began to investigate. He remembered a keepsake box Nora kept in the closet inside were locks of Leo's baby hair wrapped in a soft cloth. Quietly, discreetly, Daniel took a small strand. On a Tuesday afternoon when he knew no one would notice, he drove to a private lab. He submitted the hair along with his own. A week later, the results came back. No envelope, no dramatic music. Just an email, a few lines, one attached PDF. Probability of paternity 0%. Daniel didn't scream, didn't throw anything. He just sat there in his car parked in the hospital garage, staring at the screen. The window was slightly open, a cold wind slipped in. But the chill didn't come from the air. It came from realizing that for 7 years he'd been living inside a beautiful dream scripted by someone else. He closed his eyes. Nora was probably home cooking dinner. Leo might have been playing video games. Life continued, but Daniel didn't feel like part of it anymore. Instead of rushing home to confront her, he did something else. He opened his phone, created a new folder, titled it Truth. He saved the DNA report, took photos of the old ultrasound. He began tracking every detail: vaccination dates, appointments Nora claimed to attend, names she'd mentioned in passing. He reviewed every small moment, every quiet reply, every offhand phrase now, with the eyes of a man no longer blinded by love. What chilled Daniel most wasn't that Nora had made a mistake. It was that she had hidden it so perfectly for 7 years. Not once had she slipped, not a single expression had given her away. Everything fit, and that was terrifying. No one teaches you how to be a father when you aren't one by blood. No one prepares you to stay calm when your entire world collapses, yet people still smile at you like nothing's wrong. But Daniel knew he couldn't lose control, couldn't raise his voice, couldn't let anyone else dictate how he felt. Because if the truth had been hidden this well, he needed to know everything. The when, the why, and the who else. Most of all, he needed to know if anyone had ever truly seen him as a part of this family. So in silence, Daniel launched the biggest investigation of his life. Not for vengeance, not for pride, but for the one thing he had the right to know after loving without condition for 7 years. The truth. Daniel didn't remember how long he sat in the car after taking that photo. It wasn't blurry, it wasn't unclear, there was nothing to misinterpret. Nora stood, slightly turned, her arm gently wrapped around Mark's shoulder. She wasn't crying, she wasn't smiling. Her eyes were closed, like she was hiding inside a moment that was never supposed to exist. Daniel snapped a few more photos, not to save them, but to stop himself from screaming. Less than 30 meters away, he sat in silence and asked himself, why now? Why after 7 years? Were they still meeting? Mark Evans, the name from the old email. Daniel had spent the last 3 weeks researching him. Manager at a mid-range auto shop, married, 2 young kids, seemingly normal, decent. No signs that Mark had tried to reconnect with Nora, but also no signs he had ever truly disappeared. And that was what chilled Daniel the most. Because if it had been a mistake, a one-time error of judgment, it should have ended. But clearly it never had. When Daniel came home, he said nothing, and Nora acted like nothing was different. She walked into the kitchen, removed her scarf, placed her bag on a chair, smiled faintly. Is Leo asleep? She asked. Yeah, Daniel replied, still running a bit of a fever, but I gave him medicine. She stepped closer, placed her hand on his shoulder out of habit. He didn't push it away, but he didn't turn around either. Just stared at a blank section of the wall, measuring the quiet distance now growing between them. That night he didn't sleep. Daniel reopened the email, read it again, slowly. Every word cut through memory like glass. I haven't told Daniel. He's a good man, but the child isn't his. I'm scared. If you want to meet, come to our old spot in the park. I'll be waiting. Sent 4 weeks before their wedding. He checked the email's metadata. No signs of tampering. IP addresses matched. He wanted to be angry, but what hurt more was how calculated it all felt. Nora hadn't stumbled into silence. She had chosen it. Chosen to marry, chosen to lie, chosen to let him live with a truth she'd buried under their life together. The next morning, Daniel called in a week off, said he had to visit his sick parents. No one questioned it. Daniel never took time off. He arranged for Leo to stay with his maternal grandparents. Nora agreed easily. She was rushing a project. That only made him more certain if he didn't uncover the truth, it would stay buried forever. He rented a car, no familiar plates. 3 days later, he parked several blocks away from Mark's home. He didn't plan anything reckless. He just wanted to understand. Who was this man and why? Did his wife still feel the need to see him? Mark lived in a modest neighborhood. His wife Claire taught elementary school. 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl, both under 10. Daniel watched quietly. Routines, drop-offs, grocery runs, work breaks. On the 4th day, Mark left home around 9 a.m., a day off. At 10:15 a.m., Nora pulled into a parking lot at a secluded park in the southern edge of the city. Trees, distance, the kind of place where no one watches. They met, not long, but long enough for a photo. Full angle, clear faces, expressions that said what words never could. Daniel didn't print the photo. He saved it to an external drive, encrypted it. No confrontation, no confession. Not yet, because Daniel knew after 7 years of loving unconditionally, the only betrayal worth committing now was betraying the silence. And the next time Nora looked him in the eye, there would be no room left for lies. That night, Daniel came home earlier than expected. No warning, no message. The house was dim lit only by a soft glow from the kitchen. Leo was already asleep. Daniel set his keys on the counter, took off his coat, and walked to the living room. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out two things: a photograph Nora and Mark holding each other in the park, and the DNA results. He placed them on the table, neatly, no explanations. Then he sat down, silent, eyes fixed on the empty wall ahead, like measuring the distance between what was real and what never was. Nora came in minutes later. The door opened, her heels tapped against the hardwood floor. Babe, she started, then froze. She saw the paper, she saw the photo, and understood everything. No shouting, no accusations, no meltdown like the kind she'd feared all these years. Just Daniel, sitting still, a version of him she'd never seen before, silent, unreadable, crushing. Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper. She choked, then broke down. I'm sorry, I never meant for it to go this far. Daniel said nothing. His gaze didn't flinch, calm, steady, suffocating. Leo. He's Mark's child. Nora admitted, barely able to breathe. It was just one night. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was after we had broken up, before we got back together. She collapsed into the armchair, head in her hands. I was going to tell you. I was. But then everything felt right. You loved him. And I thought maybe the truth could stay buried forever. Daniel nodded slightly, like he wasn't hearing a confession, but confirming a calculation. So you're saying, he asked quietly, everything we built was based on a lie? Nora looked up. Her face had gone pale. No, I love you. This family is real. Leo may not share your blood, but he shares your life. He's your son, Daniel, in every way that matters. Daniel gave a tired smile, not bitter, just hollow. The problem is, he said, you made the choice for me. You decided what I should know, what I should feel, what kind of father I should be, while holding back a truth I had every right to hear. Nora lowered her head. Her shoulders trembled. You can scream, you can hit me if you want. But please, don't leave Leo. He doesn't know. He still needs you. Daniel looked up at the ceiling. 1 minute passed, maybe more. I'm not angry with you, Nora, he said quietly. I'm just sad. Because the only one who never knew the truth was the one who trusted you the most. Nora whispered, I was afraid to lose you. Daniel's voice was flat, final, and now you have. No screaming, no crashing plates, just a quiet withdrawal of trust, of presence, of the man he used to be. Daniel stood up. I'll move out for a while. I need time. For myself. For Leo. For you. Nora rushed to him, grabbing his hand. Please, don't leave us. I messed up, I know. But this family, we're still a family. Daniel gently pulled his hand free. His eyes didn't leave hers. This family, he said, was never real. Because it was built on a truth I was never part of. Nora collapsed, sobbing, her cries echoing into the quiet walls. Daniel walked to the door, closed it gently, not a sound. Outside, rain had begun to fall. He didn't open an umbrella, just stood there for a moment, letting the cold soak in, letting the pain settle into something real. Then he walked away, not because he gave up, but because in a place where truth didn't live, there was nothing left worth staying for. Daniel left early that morning, no dramatic exit. Just a small suitcase, a laptop, and a few changes of clothes. Leo was still asleep. Daniel paused outside his son's room, hand resting on the doorknob, and then let go. He couldn't wake him. Not because he lacked the courage, but because he couldn't bear the thought of that confused, half-awake look following him for the rest of his life. Leo was innocent. Daniel knew that. The boy didn't choose to be born, didn't choose who he'd call dad. But between truth and emotion, Daniel had come to understand. There are lines that once crossed, you can't live with yourself fully again. A few days later, Nora called. She was crying, desperate. Please, don't tell Leo. Don't bring this to court. Let's handle it privately for his sake. He doesn't need a courtroom full of lawyers and paper trails. But Daniel had already decided. He filed for divorce, and along with it, a motion to legally verify paternity using the DNA results. Not out of revenge, not to punish, but to draw the line, to name things clearly. If Leo wasn't his biological son, then the Law Society and everyone around them needed to see that for what it was. Daniel wouldn't carry the label of the man who walked out on his child for the rest of his life. But the world isn't that simple. Just 1 week later, word got out. A relative, maybe by accident, maybe not, mentioned the story at a family gathering. Then the rumors spread. Twitter threads, Facebook whispers. Daniel, the perfect husband, the dedicated father, just threw his family away over biology. 7 years as a dad, and he bails the moment it gets inconvenient, cruel. Even colleagues began to shift. Subtle changes, fewer greetings in the hallway, glances that lingered too long, cold messages that once would have come with warmth. Daniel read the posts, saw the messages, but he said nothing. No replies, no clarifications, no Facebook statement or angry defense. He let them believe whatever they needed to believe. Because he understood something most people never do. When a lie is protected for too long, the first person to speak the truth always looks like the villain. The hearing began on a cold winter morning. The air was thick, not with noise, but with emotions waiting to break. Daniel arrived early, alone, no family, no friends. Just himself, dressed in a dark suit. Eyes steady expression, composed but unyielding. Across the room, Nora sat with her attorney. She didn't look like the woman he used to know. No confidence in her posture. Pale face, hair neatly combed, but her gaze was heavy. For the first time since this all began, Daniel saw fear in her, not resistance. Nora's lawyer began first. She argued that for 7 years, Daniel had acted as a father. He had chosen it, signed school forms, paid tuition, stayed up during illnesses, driven to appointments, sat through every fever. He wasn't forced into fatherhood, she said. He embraced it. DNA can't erase love, Your Honor. Nora's voice cracked as she spoke. He accepted the child. Leo calls him dad, not just on paper, but in his heart. Daniel said nothing. He let his lawyer speak for him, measured, clinical, unwavering. His attorney presented the evidence. At the time of Leo's birth, Daniel had been denied any truthful information. There had been no DNA test, no mention, no doubt shared. The petitioner claims Daniel should have known. She said, voice sharp, but the truth is, he was kept in the dark. And had he been given the facts, he might have chosen differently. The room fell quiet. Even the reporters near the back stopped scribbling. No raised voices, no outbursts, just the slow, suffocating realization that silence, when it conceals truth, becomes its own kind of betrayal. After over an hour of arguments, the judge spoke. Calm, firm, no emotion. Based on the evidence provided, she said the court recognizes Daniel is not the biological father of the child. However, due to his consistent presence in the child's life for over 7 years, he is granted the right to visitation should both parties come to agreement. No one cheered, no one screamed. Only the sound of the gavel, one sharp, dry strike like a final period after a sentence too long. The next day, a few local papers covered the hearing. No clickbait headlines, no scandalized takes. Just one simple line. A father reclaimed the truth through silence and dignity. Daniel didn't post on social media. He made no statements. But those who knew him understood. He wasn't trying to destroy anyone. He only wanted one thing. That truth still had a place in this world. After the verdict, Daniel didn't return to his rental apartment right away. Instead, he drove to Leo's elementary school, parking far enough to avoid being seen, but close enough to watch the gate. It had only been a few weeks, but it felt like a lifetime. That evening, Nora sent a message. Leo's asking why you're not picking him up anymore. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Tell him Dad just needs a little time, but I think about him every single day. A few days later, Nora asked if they could meet the three of them. When Leo saw Daniel, he ran into his arms like nothing had changed. That hug, that warmth, that trust. It crushed Daniel quietly from the inside. After lunch, while Nora took Leo for a short walk in the park, another man appeared. Mark, hands in his pockets, eyes uncertain. He stood for a moment, then approached. I'm Mark, he said, voice rough. I know you've heard everything by now. Daniel nodded, didn't extend a hand. I have. Leo, he's my blood, Mark continued. I'd like to be part of his life, make up for lost time. Daniel's gaze didn't waver. It was cold, controlled, and cutting. Then where were you for the last 7 years, he asked. Silence. Daniel bent down and picked up a dry branch from the ground, snapped it in half. You want to make up for what you missed, fine, but you'll never get back what you abandoned. He turned and walked away, left Mark standing there speechless. That night, Daniel lay alone in his rented room. On the desk was a crumpled drawing Leo had made a house, a smiling man holding the hand of a small boy. At the bottom, in uneven handwriting, I love you, Dad, Daniel. Daniel didn't know what the future would hold, whether Leo would grow up and understand, whether he'd resent Daniel someday for stepping back. But he knew this much. He had never stepped away from love. He had only stepped away from a lie dressed too perfectly as truth. 6 months after the trial, Daniel moved to a small lakeside town, the kind with whispering pine forests, roads covered in fallen leaves, and a creaky wooden cabin tucked into the hillside. No one there knew his name. No one cared why a quiet man in his 40s had come to live alone. He brewed coffee in the mornings, read paperbacks by the window, and tossed sticks for the dogs in the yard. He worked as a freelance structural consultant just enough to get by. The big house, the family dinners, the laughter-filled living room. Those were memories now. Beautiful, but untouchable. Leo still visited sometimes. Once a month, the boy would burst through the door, arms wide open, stories tumbling out of him like spring rain. Daniel didn't ask questions. He didn't lecture or press. He simply listened the way a father listens, not with ears, but with everything he is. He no longer blamed Nora, no longer searched for answers. He simply lived with the quiet dignity of someone who chose to keep his kindness even when the world didn't. Whether anyone saw it or not. It was an early autumn afternoon. The sky was a soft blue scattered with slow drifting clouds. On a grassy hill, Daniel and Leo were flying a kite. The boy ran, stumbled, got back up, dirt on his knees, laughter in his voice, sunlight in his smile. The kite soared high above them, dancing with the wind like it was carrying all the unspoken things they'd lived through together. Daniel stood still, hands in his pockets, watching quietly, not thinking about what he'd lost, but fully present with what he still had. He knew one day Leo would grow up. He might ask hard questions. He might feel confused, angry, hurt. But Daniel believed that above all else, the boy would remember one thing. There was once a man who chose to love me, not because he had to, but because love never needed DNA to be real. Daniel was no longer the man with the perfect family, but he was the man who walked through betrayal, through silence, through public judgment, and still chose not to hurt the one soul who was truly innocent. And sometimes, that kind of ending, the quiet kind, is the one that matters most.